Well, after about 4 years of division, chaos, partisan clashes, and pretty much everything else under the sun, that all came to the head yesterday in Washington, D.C., when just mass groups of protesters pretty much stormed the Capitol building. And I'm going to skip kind of the long intro and say it was appalling. And today we're just going to kind of go over our thoughts and maybe what's next, not only for our republic, but for the Republican Party, Trump, and all that stuff. So, Drew, it's been a pretty freaking wild 24 hours. So, what are your takeaways from this? I mean, how did you feel yesterday with all this going on?
It was such a roller coaster of a day because it's almost like the news of the day was going to be the Georgia runoff, right? Everyone was looking at the Georgia runoff. Everyone was excited to see who actually like came out and won. As we were getting the final returns, and in the morning we started to get an idea of who won, and that was the main headline. And then all that quickly shifted when, as you described, a part of the Trump's protesters in front of the Capitol building stormed it, and making, people had to get evacuated, right? All the senators and congressmen and women had to be evacuated. People lost their lives. A woman was shot and killed by law enforcement, and there's an investigation looking into that. Another gentleman, from what I understand, fell as he was climbing up over the property onto the Capitol. He fell and suffered an injury that killed him from that. And then a few others um, passed away due to, like, I imagine, heart failure, but we're not sure. It's something related to just like the chaos. And then from what I also hear is a law enforcement officer passed away due to the riots. So, you know, a really dark day, a really dark day in American history. I think that everyone knows this. You don't need me to tell you that. What we saw yesterday was not normal, should not be normal, and was kind of embarrassing to the world. It's a dark spot in our like modern history.
Yeah, I can't say anything else different from that. I totally agree. And I was lucky in some ways where, I was watching the hearings and I remember they stopped for that 2 hours they're allowed for Arizona. And I'm like, cool, I'm going to go out on a ski, turn off my cellular service and just disconnect. And I remember we ran into a guy out there and he's like, did you guys hear that, Trump supporters and, alt right, whatever, just stormed the Capitol? And I'm like, oh, geez, and kind of blew it off and got back in an hour and saw the news. And I'm like, holy crap, this is unprecedented. I mean, the only time that the White House and the Capitol and that whole area have ever been threatened was in 1812 when the British burned down the White House. And I mean, just to put it into context, Erdogan, leader of Turkey, Venezuelan government officials, and pretty much every other country, even authoritarian countries, have basically tweeted out or sent their condolences saying, you guys need to calm down. It's pretty bad when authoritarians are telling us to calm down for so many levels. And I'm not even getting to the internal domestic side of it, but the world right now is appalled. And I can't reiterate that enough is that if we ever want to have an agreement or negotiate with a country again, they're going to have this against us. Image wise, politically, it's pretty hard for countries to think that we're this gold standard of democracy after yesterday.
Yeah, I mean that image of us as a city on the hill, right? Is that new experiment that, like, hey, we're actually the beaming light of democracy. Like that doesn't look like that. It doesn't look like that at all. It doesn't look like we're succeeding in our democracy. It doesn't look like we're thriving because we're not. We're really not. I mean, look at our country right now and look at what happened. And let's we everyone saw what happened yesterday, right? We all saw what happened, and I think we need to, like, why did this happen? This did not just happen out of a vacuum. This happened because of a consistent and concerted effort to make people distrust the election process, to convince people that their election was stolen. People don't just storm the Capitol out of boredom. These people obviously legitimately believed that their election was stolen from them, when the facts have shown that it's not. It was a fair election and they lost. So, but you have Republicans in Congress, and you have, of course, the president consistently spewing these lies and convincing these people of this fantasy, this myth, so that they're basically radicalized into thinking that this is appropriate behavior. It's not at all. And to think that this is a legitimate grievance is stupid, right? There's a difference between people, protesting real injustices that have been studied and documented and understood by historians and sociologists of like, hey, there's problems with police injustice. There are things that are worth, protesting over, and things that are not. And this is, you lost an election. They protested against the functioning democratic process. I can't get behind that. I can't view this as anything but stupid and immature, and frankly, it turned into a mob. Now, I'm sure that there are people that were there that just wanted to wave a Trump flag, express their anger, and go home. I'm sure that there's plenty of people like that, but it turned into something else, and we let it happen. That's my main point. Is it this wasn't some like, whoa, where did this come from? Like, we let this happen. Everyone knew
Yeah.
that Trump was telling his supporters, your thing is stolen, go to show force, go to the Capitol. The Capitol Police, we just see now the Capitol Police chief is resigning because he obviously did not perform his duties in protecting the Capitol. People waltzed in with flags and guns, and it led to people dying. And it's like, what I saw was such a disgrace. Like, it's really hard to feel proud about my country after a day like that.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. And I've seen, contrasting opinions, centrist, leftist, alt right, whatever. And some people are saying, well, I'm so glad, that last night Lindsey Graham spoke up and said we can't do this anymore. And all these other senators said similar stuff. And I'm just like, I don't care, because they've played with Trump's delusions for months, right? They've allowed this to simmer and kind of boil over for months. I've heard arguments where people say, well, these guys just want to stay loyal to the Republican Party, and they just want to stay elected. And cool, yip-de-doo. But the problem is that people are dead. Our democracy is, I don't want to say shambles yet, but it's close. And what was it to do? To entertain Trump's delusions, And what really makes me irritated is just the amount of people who are comparing this to the BLM protests. And that I have been quite critical of how those were carried out.
Sure, of
And
course.
and I don't agree with them, and I just want to say that. But at the same time, there's a difference. George Floyd actually died. George Floyd, there's proof that this man died, and people were angry about injustice. Here, Trump's been just playing with his false delusions, and his supporters have been drinking the Kool-Aid, basically. And so they literally protested and harmed people over fantasies that don't even exist. And I think it's just the culmination, like you said. And I don't know really where we go from here, because we truly just have a bunch of people that were happy he did it. And even, the problem is here is that even the people I think that were waving the flags there and didn't actually get involved in the violence, they were okay with it. I watched interviews, with the
Mm.
people that were outside there, and they're like, oh, we like, there's this one lady, I was watching a CNN interview, and there's this one lady who's like, we need to drag every senator out here and make them pay. And I don't know what that means, but it's not good. And so, it's kind of that thing where, like inside of a terrorist cell in, I don't know, somewhere in the Middle East, not everyone is a terrorist, but they're allowing it to happen sometimes. The complacency is a problem. And if you play with fire, eventually it's going to get carried away and take off. And I think
Yeah.
that's what happened.
JD Nolan 93, thank you for the follow, bud. Um, yeah, man, I think I agree. Like, I saw Lindsey Graham say that, and like, what a rat, what a snake. Like, I saw him go up there, and he's like, Trump and I have had quite a journey together, but enough is enough. Like, dude, enough was enough months ago. Enough was enough on November. Like, you're the one's been dragging this out. So like, don't, like, it's too little, too late, right? There have been GOP members that have, like someone like Mitt Romney, who I still ideologically disagree with, but he's, at least I can tell he's like, believes in his own ethics, and has been saying, Biden won legitimately. Trump should not spew these nonsense things that hurt our democracy, and he's been consistent with that. Whereas, like Kelly Loeffler switched her contestation and she just lost her Senate seat, which she was appointed to, and she's like, after the, travesty of today, I switched my vote. And while it's good that that's happening, it's like, yeah, but come on, too little, too late. Like, I don't know. It's like, I don't know. It's like the bull has already run through the china shop. You can't now be like, oh wow, maybe we should be safer where we put our bulls. Like, yeah, we should have weeks ago, months ago.
Yeah, I don't know what they were thinking, because it's pretty sad that it took an insurrection, deaths, and violence for them to finally come to terms with Trump is dangerous. People like you and I for years have been saying that he's detrimental. And there's a bigger problem with this is that what happens when something like this happens? Because I'm not defending Republicans, but just to be devil's advocate, their voters like Trump. They like power, like all politicians. What do you do? And that's a way more complicated issue than I think into this episode, but that's a problem just systematically with how that party reacted to Trump. But I don't really know how you fix that. And now I'm just curious where the party even goes because you have such splintering now that I'm just really confused about it. I mean, Mitt Romney, Politico, reported that he literally called out Ted Cruz and said in quotes, "This is what you've got." And so how are these guys in the same party now when you have some calling out Trump is ridiculous and others are literally defending him left and right? I just don't know what goes from there, but
Well,
I just don't know what they. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
well, let's. I say we get into it, right? Because I
Okay.
mean, that is
Okay.
that is what's next. It's like, what the hell happens next? And I think that, especially considering like the context of like the GOP, the Republicans, it's going to be hard to say. I think right now it's almost like saying, like what's the damage of the hurricane when you're like still in it, right? You know what I mean? Like the hurricane's not over yet. We got to make sure the hurricane goes and passes before we can assess the damage that's left over. I think that we're gonna have a better understanding of like what the hell the GOP is gonna do in a year or two instead of a week or two. But things are still changing fairly quick. Um, I think that what you'll see is senators will be quicker, I think, strangely, to dump Trump. Um, you know what I mean? Because if you have to convince your entire state, you have to get the majority of your entire state, and especially if you look at places like Georgia, and even how close Texas got to being flipped, which is still a couple years away. But I understand why McConnell is like, you guys, we need to dump this Trump train. But if you're a representative in the House and you have a smaller district, if you have a vehemently Trump district in West Virginia, you're not gonna jump the train yet. If your voter is the kind of guy that goes and storms the Capitol, you're going to still be on board because of the nature of our system and how you know these congressmen and women that have these smaller districts, they need to appeal to these sometimes radical bases. They're going to be holding on to this Trump train longer than the senators and larger like appointed officials in the GOP, which have to kind of take pressure from a larger public.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's a good point because I mean we've talked about this numerous times. The Senate is more pragmatic, obviously smaller, deals with larger populations. So I do think in general you're right that they will probably be easier to kind of dust off this Trumpism. But you're right, the House it's going to be interesting. And my big question is, and I think it's kind of what all this is resting on, is what does Trump do once his office term is over? And I've heard some people say he's going to flee to Scotland, though Scotland doesn't want him. Some people say maybe he's going to flee to a banana republic to avoid prosecution, which would be ridiculous in so many ways. Or does he stay involved and keep rallying his family members? Like Lara Trump is talking about running for the Senate. I think it was Georgia or North Carolina. I would have to check that. I'll look into that right now. But yeah, like I'm really curious what is next, and I think it just depends if the cult of Trump either stays active or kind of goes back into the shadows a little bit.
Yeah.
And I just don't know. I think you're right. It's too early to really tell. But I do feel like there's going to be some sort of just fracture inside of the Republican Party. Oh, hi, Jamie. And yeah, Nicola Sturgeon. Sorry, that's the name. Yeah, because exactly like our comment here says, yeah, Trump's not allowed to enter because of the lockdown.
Yeah, I
So,
mean,
and
I think the good guess, like a good educated guess, is he'll probably start some like weird media crap to like spew his thing, or become a major player in Newsmax or OANN. And then he's probably going to have to deal with legal troubles, is what I'm understanding. Is now look again. We talked about pardons a few weeks ago. We're hearing more about he wants to pardon himself because now you have you have DC prosecutors looking at like charges of sedition and crazy and stuff like that. So he's going to have legal troubles, from maybe even stemming from yesterday, if not other things related to like the ongoing investigation in New York. Um, I think he's going to be dealing with legal issues. If is he going to be able to like flee the country? I don't know, bro. If I like, he's pretty recognizable, dude. Can you imagine he just like dips, and then you're just like a tourist in like Malaysia or Thailand, and you see a dude that like kind of looks like Trump, but he's not orange anymore, he's just kind of gray. But you're like, that could be him. Like he's on the run. Like that actually could be kind of fun to be like, I saw Donald Trump in Malaysia. Like, no, you didn't. Like, where is he? Where is he now? Like Santa. Um, no, but I imagine he's going to deal with a lot of legal issues and probably just yell a lot on like right wing media too, because he loves the attention and loves that kind of support system, I guess you could call it. Um, I think that like, but we have to even get to that point. We have to get past these next
Yeah.
14 days because you have talks of invoking the 25th Amendment. You have talks of another round of impeachment. Now, I don't know if that will. I don't know if either of those things will happen. In fact, I kind of bet that they won't in full because it's so close. And the big thing is, just before we recorded this podcast, Trump said that I will not be having a second term, and my focus now is on a peaceful transition. I think even though he's like didn't say I concede, it's enough for me at least. Like he's conceding, you know, it's over, and I think because of that, I don't think Pence will like invoke the 25th Amendment, right? I think they would have if Trump was like, keep going, keep storming, keep doing it. But after yesterday, I think everyone was so shocked. And even Trump, you know, sent out that video of like, be peaceful, please. And then today, him saying, I'm focusing on a peaceful transition. I think that, you know, the progressive Democrats will do this impeachment for show, but it'll just kind of, let's just get him out of here in 13 days.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, a couple things here. You know, I don't know. It's tough. Like I don't really support the 25th Amendment at this point of it, though. This is definitely the moment where I think it could be used. Now, here's the thing: is that I think kind of the genius of Trump's division and extremism to a certain extent is the fact that he's good at doing it under the table enough that it's hard to actually get him for something. And you know, for those who aren't familiar, there's the term that's been going around a lot. You know, stochastic terrorism, right? And just the definition here is the public demonization of a person or group resulting in the incitement of a violent act. And one of the examples they give using rhetoric, which is hostile or hateful, but doesn't explicitly tell people to carry out an act of violence. And it's one of these hard forms of terrorism that we saw, especially yesterday, that it'd be really hard to prosecute, right? Because you have a lot of free speech people that would say, you know, well, he didn't actually do it himself. Like he brought it up or he might have implied it, but he
Yeah.
didn't actually scream fire in a burning room or whatever. So yeah, I think what he's done is stochastic terrorism, but again, it's hard to prove, and that's kind of
It's not.
Trump's whole MO.
Yeah, it's not going to hold up in court. I mean, because like the one
No.
thing was like, you know, have a show of force or whatever he said, but you could easily argue that like, oh, I wanted a show of force as in like, you know, peaceful protest. Like that's it. That's all it takes to tip that. It's like I don't think you're going to get to that point where he will actually be charged with sedition or anything like
Right.
that. Um, the people down on the ground will. You bet your ass the people on the ground will, because the FBI has publicly stated that they're working with every possible authority to identify and arrest anyone who was in that building, who broke into the Capitol Hill and was, you know, damaging like they're all like, the FBI is going to take you down.
Okay.
And what's really hilarious is a lot of these guys were live streaming it anyway, so they had their faces because they weren't wearing masks. Shocker. And so no masks, live streaming yourself breaking into a government federal building, committing a heinous crime. Pretty smart, especially a couple dudes. I heard that there was even one state senator from, I believe, West Virginia, or state representative from West Virginia, newly elected, was there shouting his name in the third person. He was like, "I'm in, baby, I'm in. Dave Harowitz got into the Capitol," and like, dude, you're gonna lose your seat. Like that's you're committing a crime. Like that's literally a crime. Like you're breaking and entering into a federal building, the one of the most sacred. And
Yeah.
I think that the mentality, it's interesting to look at these people do this, and it almost like they don't think of it as a crime. It's almost like they're walking into like the new Disneyland resort. They're like taking pictures with the podium and like flexing on the gram, and you're like, dude, you're committing a crime. You've been so I don't know if it's like just blind. I don't know if it's just stupidity or it's like this feeling of empowerment because of Trump, but they obviously felt that they could just waltz in, and they did.
Yeah, okay. So there's a lot there.
Yeah,
So
sorry.
so no. So first, I think you're right. And that's kind of the thing that I really want to hammer home here is that we are lucky that these people were quite belligerent and not really prepared and quite careless. Like, imagine if this was an actual, like, carried out and planned and
Right.
orchestrated coup, right? These guys were idiots. Let's be completely honest. That guy that sat in Nancy Pelosi's desk, taking selfies, mask off, great move, man. Like, what did you accomplish? Nothing. And I mentioned in our episode 2 days ago, I'm reading that Michael Malice book kind of on the new right. And he basically does talk about how the new right is kind of an anarchist tinge who is more care about tearing down a corrupt system, but they don't really have any solutions for what the next step is. And I was kind of shaking my head when I've been reading this book, but yesterday I saw it, man. These people don't have a plan. They just want to tear down the system. And that's what's interesting to me is that's why I think there's going to be a bigger schism
It's
inside of the Republican Party is because there's almost like this new anarchist kind of wave inside of them, which is going to be hard to tame or agree with.
it's like, I mean, it's not that much different than what we saw with Antifa. Like,
Right.
there were people at those protests that, whether you agree with it or not, did have a reason to be there. And there's people at Trump protests that I think they're stupid for it, but they believe that their election was stolen, so they had a reason. But it's like, but then you had agitators that are just so wrapped up in shit that they just cause violence. So the comment here, like, yeah, who'd break into federal building ever? Not like it's Portland or something. Like, kind of, ha 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 ha. Oh, shoes on the other foot. Like, yeah, dude. No one here is supporting breaking into federal buildings. It's definitely not okay on either side. And
Exactly.
and on Portland, they brought in the SWAT version of ICE to detain all those people. Yet in the Capitol, they let them waltz in. Like, what the hell? There's obviously a discrepancy in the response. Now, I don't think we should have had a Portland's response. I don't want these people to be tased and, hosed down, and like, I think that de-escalation is a good thing. I think it's a tragedy that the person was shot by law enforcement. I wish they had been able to detain her peacefully. But it's worth noting the discrepancy in the reaction of one Black Lives Matter protest where you had like a military style response, and in this you had Capitol Police taking selfies with the protesters. Like,
Yeah.
how is that okay?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think, I've been seeing a lot of that today, kind of looking into it a little, and it does disturb me because of the difference in response. Like the former U.S. Capitol Police Chief, who was, I think, Terrence Gaynor, he says that he wants to give, police the benefit of the doubt, and they were attempting to de-escalate, and they weren't prepared for such volume of crowd. Come on, man. Trump has literally on the air said that on January 6th, there's going to be a big protest outside the White House and Capitol Hill. Like, let's give me a break. Like, you guys knew. You guys knew here. And, I really do worry that the response is different, and it's not a good look, man. Like, I'll never forget, when Trump and his team basically tear gassed peaceful protesters outside the White House
Right.
and cleared them out of there. There's no problem with that. But in this case, it seems to be a double standard, and I'm not going to jump out on a limb and just say it's like just systematic racism, white privilege. There's probably tinges of that in there. My theory is that I would imagine that there are people inside of the police department and inside of the Capitol Hill security forces that probably sympathized with the
Of
protesters. And
course
you
there
can
are.
even see it, right? You can see it through some of the pictures that were taken. And that to me is horrifying because that's just not okay. Like
Okay.
it's a bipartisan thing here, right?
Right. Like, there is. I mean, there was a study done, and it was 80% of police officers voted for Donald Trump. The other 20% of that, 7%, or the of that last 20%, that wasn't even for Hillary Clinton in 2016. 7% was for Gary Johnson. So you had 87% of police officers not voting for Hillary Clinton. Now, granted, Hillary Clinton was not a very good candidate. And I'm not saying that police should be
Right.
50-50. Like, I'm not saying we need to like balance out our police force Republican Democrat. That's a very slippery slope down a very bad road. But it's worth noting that the police forces of the United States are overwhelmingly conservative and overwhelmingly in support of Trump. And so it's not surprising when there is a discrepancy of reactions to the protesters. That's the so when I'm saying things like when I say things like I'm not saying things like the cops let them all in, like they were working with them and coordinating. Not quite. I'm not that tinfoil hat, but I think you had the point is there's probably a good amount of police that sympathize with these protesters where they do not sympathize with Black Lives Matter protesters. And maybe, just maybe, that plays into how they react.
Right. Right. And I mean, I will be fair at least to the point where I'm sure there was a lot of chaos going on down there yesterday.
Absolutely.
You know
Absolutely.
what I mean? Like, and I would also like to think that even if you voted for Trump or voted for Hillary, it's not going to always affect your job. But again,
No,
I
it
think
should
you're
not.
right that there probably is a percentage who sympathized with it. And that isn't good. It's not a good look. It's also the fact that these people got in so easily, man. I mean, how much money how much money is spent on keeping these people safe in there? And these people just waltzed in. I mean, we had a guy in a Viking outfit. He was able to get in there easily. Like it just blows my mind. And like
$460 million a year is the Capitol Police budget. 460
and
million.
and okay, and here's a number. When the 150 people were arrested by Capitol Police after the Brett Kavanaugh demonstrations, 52 have been arrested so far as of yesterday.
Yeah,
Okay. Like, I'm not saying that we need, like, that I'm sure the investigations are still going on. It's not like they're just going to round up everybody overnight, but
sure.
the disparity so far seems quite different. And I think there is going to be some serious. I mean, basically, I think they need to open up some sort of committee to investigate this. And I mean, there's reports of 11 Molotov cocktails, according to a U.S. attorney, Michael Sherwin. He said there were 11 Molotov cocktails, people with semi-automatic rifles, and he said in quotes they were ready to go. And
There was
okay,
reports of people with zip ties. There was pipe bombs found at the RNC and DNC headquarters.
it's just alarming. And I mean, let's be honest, Trump directly incited this. I mean, there's that lovely video yesterday where he's like, I'll walk down you. Oh, Pennsylvania Avenue. We'll walk together. Right out of the populist handbook, right? Like, he's like, I'll walk with you. We'll all walk together. No, he went back to the White House and chilled. Probably watched it on the news. It's just ridiculous.
Hold on. So the Kavanaugh stuff looked similar to this. I do not recall people storming the halls of the Supreme Court or the Congressional building during the
I
Kavanaugh
definitely don't remember that.
protest.
I just think
Now,
that's
if there
wrong.
was people trying to bust out barriers and push back Capitol Police, then yeah, they should be fucking arrested. I don't understand what the problem is. They were storming halls for sure. Are you kidding me, man? I mean, I'm sorry, bro, but like you just that's there was no way they were storming the halls like this. Like breaking shit, breaking windows, making everyone evacuate. If you think that that's the same, you live in a different reality, bro. I mean, let's just be
Right.
real, man. I'm not trying to call. Well, I mean, look, you're commenting here. I'm calling you out because what you're saying is ridiculous.
Right. Right. And okay, so let's move on a little bit to the 25th Amendment, because I actually wanted to there's something interesting I read today that I just wanted to mention about the fact that people are talking about it both sides of the aisle. It's probably one of the bigger bipartisan agreements right now, but I don't think it's going to happen. But I just wanted to mention this because I think it's interesting. I was reading an excerpt from a book by a guy named let's see, I have it here, Brian C. Colt. He's a Michigan State University law professor, and he actually wrote a book on this exact subject. And he basically said that actually the 25th Amendment will never actually remove the president,
Yeah.
because basically what it does is it's a provisional temporary transfer of power. And so basically after 4 days, Trump would actually be given back the role, and if he's still not able to, it would go to Congress, and then it would just kind of become a stalemate where actually both sides would have to vote on this. And it always kind of looks like Trump inevitably would be back in power. And so, and also he's still technically the president, even though Pence would resume his duties as president. So
Yeah,
I,
it's
I
not
think a lot
worth.
of people are, yeah, like I think a lot of people are resting on this as, this solve all. It's not going to solve much, and it could actually just cause more chaos inside of the Capitol, to be
Again,
honest.
if we saw what happened today yesterday happen again and and Trump continue to encourage it, then I think it would be like the 25th, even if it was just symbolic, just so that like Pence could actually do things and people would but it hasn't. And the fact that Trump today has calmed down and he said, he got out of his 12-hour Twitter nap or whatever. He got put in the corner of social media, and then he got back, and then he um, and he said like I'm focusing on the transition. So I think that now, like I think he realized it's over. There's nothing he can do. All of his friends abandoned him. Even the guy kiss ass Lindsey Graham abandoned him. So it's over. And So yeah, I don't see the use for the 25th either. Even though you do have, like, I'm looking right here. John Kelly said he would have, if he was on that cabinet still, he would have voted for the 25th. Um, and he explained that they should have that discussion, right? But I think now that Trump has signaled that it's like it is actual real transition time, and he's like done with this nonsense. Um, well, not done with this nonsense, but he's okay transition. Like, we don't need the 25th. We don't need to impeach him again or anything. Like, let's just make sure that no one else dies in the next 13 days and inaugurate Biden.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And okay, and the last thing kind of on that, but a little different is how do you think President Biden can deal with this? Like how do you I mean, you and I have both seen some of the ridiculous stuff about, just going around on social media and the conspiracies and the just different bubble information. Like how could a president, do you think, even try to unify the nation after this? Because I don't know if it's even possible.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know either. Who cares about Kelly anyway? I mean, true. Who cares about John Kelly anyway?
True.
Um,
Good point.
yeah. Well, one is the one thing I did see is Biden said that they shouldn't impeach Trump again. Like, because Nancy Pelosi has brought it up, and then they asked Biden, like, do you think the House should impeach Trump a second time? And he said no. He said the best thing to do is, like, that would not help the country heal. It's I know we hear that term a lot of, like, it's time now for the country to heal, but, like, it really actually feels like this is now the time for us to heal. We just saw something pretty shocking, I think, in American history, and we don't want to see that again.
Yeah.
No matter which side it's on, like left or right, we should not be at the point in our democracy that people are storming the congressional building to stop the democratic process. So I don't know how he does it with, like, the Trump people, but, like, this may help him in a weird way. In a weird way, like this, how shocking this was, and how quickly Republicans are now turning against Trump. It might help Biden.
Yeah.
And then I think also just focusing his policy on things that get uh, cross the aisle people excited. Direct payment stimulus checks. Obviously, he doesn't do that. He can only encourage Congress to do that, but he should do that. He should encourage Congress to pass more robust direct payment stimulus checks to people. That's what would get a lot of people excited. Infrastructure, focus on infrastructure. Focus on combating China. Be very clear on how he combats China, because that was a big criticism from the right, was that he's in the pocket of China and Trump's the only strong against China. So those are things I think that would be popular among a lot of people, instead of
Mhm.
focusing on things like, I don't know, more of the progressive identity politics. But and then in a year or two, then you go back to focusing on healthcare when, like, things have calmed down. I don't know, something like that, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. And I do think, though, some people are kind of lost in the, I guess, the Trumpist conspiracy bubble. I think a lot of moderates were appalled by this, if they weren't already. But I'm just surprised, though, that, I kind of thought that maybe this would be the moment where even some of those people would be like, hey, this is not good. But it's almost like the whataboutism continues. And, like, I feel like that's what we need to get rid of, is like, I understand that both sides are bad, believe me, but whataboutism is never the solution for stuff like this. Like, and that's the problem is, like, I mean, even Fox News and all these other organizations were still peddling whataboutism last night, even after all this tragedy yesterday. And there's a
Yeah.
time and place to talk about the whataboutism. Like, what about Portland? What about Chop and Chaz and all that BS? But it's not today. We need to address the actual issue that's happening right now. And
Right.
yeah, it might be a long year, man. It really might be. But I agree with you. Biden needs, I think, to stay simple and focused on what he's actually getting out there right now.
Yeah. I mean, if your argument is, if you have to defend your position by always saying, but what about, or what about that, like, it's not a good argument. Like,
No.
that's a failing grade on an academic paper. You have to address your claim with evidence and a warrant. And what about doesn't qualify. And so, especially when you're talking about, I know the guy in the chat thinks we're calling him out, and I kind of am. Is it though? No, no, dude, like, for real, man. That's not a good argument. If you're saying that, like, if you look at the events of yesterday and you say, "Oh, but what about Portland?" What about Portland? What did you think should have happened yesterday? Like, that's what I'm asking is, do you think this is acceptable? Trump supporters storming in the the Capitol building. And if you say, well, I don't think Portland's acceptable either, like, yeah, but I'm not talking about Portland. I'm talking about this.
Well, I'll use a simple thing we tell our children. An eye for an eye makes the world blind, right? And I mean, yes, we can say Portland's bad. We can say this is bad, but if you keep just stacking these layers on, we're never going to fix anything. And the comments here, I agree that it is like, yes, the whataboutism is just rampant. But again, if that's the first thing you have to do, then there's something wrong with how you're looking at this logically.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, and if you want to have a conversation about like the overall climate of like, oh, we're very divided, then yeah, that's a valid point. But okay. Yeah, but
all
every
right, let's just keep going. We're gonna it's we don't want to get too heated here, and it's a waste of time.
No, I mean, no, he's welcome to comment, but like he's just been saying like anti BLM memes for fun in the background, and while ignoring literally the most heinous like elective day in our history.
Yeah, just trolling us. That's kind of the new strategy, anyways. But I don't know. Do you have any more thoughts on this? I'm sure we'll be talking about this for weeks, but
Oh, I just think it's a pivotal moment, but to kind of stick it in this guy's face too, I think it's really good for Democrats. I think it makes Republicans look like shit. They look like a disorganized, rowdy party. Obviously, Trump's claims about the party of law and order look pretty bad when his supporters do this crap.
Mhm.
Biden won. He now has Georgia lost, right? So all that arguing over the direct payments in the Senate and all this Trump BS over the election cost them Georgia. So now you have Biden coming in with the House and the Senate on his side. He's going to probably be pretty bold in his policies, from what I'm hearing, but I hope it's bold in the right way that unites people. And I think Republicans are going to have a really tough time coming back from this, considering how bad they look.
Definitely. I just hope the nation can heal because I've been reading a lot on Rome, and yesterday was the first day where I've really seen some serious parallels between kind of the beginning of the end of Rome and where we're at. When 50% of the nation literally can't handle it, and you have people storming the Capitol, it's always never good because the other side at times then just responds with even more like divisive policy and rhetoric, which I hope Biden doesn't do. I don't think he's the one to do it, but I really do see that we're in a part of our democracy that's worrying. I
I
hope
think,
not the twilight, but it's worrying.
but real quick though, we have to remember that when we talk about healing, like healing is not just like, hey man, that was crazy. Let's just make up. Healing means how do we avoid this problem in the future? How do we avoid
Absolutely.
people getting radicalized to such an extent that they feel it's appropriate to storm against the democratic process? Like healing means, like, yeah, the media stoked the comment as well. Very good point. Healing means we need to have accountability in the media as well as accountability in our public representatives so that they don't spew garbage and give people brainworms to the point where they think QAnon is somehow a legitimate way to view the world. Healing is not just like, oh, now I just shake hands with Lindsey Graham. Healing is cutting out the cancer that is misinformation and stupidity in our populace. And I'm done. I'm done playing nice. I really am. After yesterday, I'm done like tiptoeing. Some people in this country are morons, and we're seeing them. Like those were the people that stormed the Capitol.
I mean, honestly, like I was kind of thinking maybe it's time for more anti-establishment things in general. But after kind of what we've seen, I was talking to a good friend yesterday about this, and we were both kind of saying like maybe there's a reason why the establishment has kept this from happening for so long. I mean, you have Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. I mean, they're corrupt. Chuck Grassley, they're old and corrupt and probably need to go, but maybe there's a reason why we don't want to go too extreme on either side, and this establishment in some ways has at least kept stability. You can definitely debate me on that, prove me wrong, but I almost think that maybe we need to get away from extremes in general, and I
100%.
don't know how we do that. I think having 4 to 5 parties could be a start. Obviously that's a dream because it would keep the extremes away from taking over one of the two parties. But I think there's things that need to change. I agree with you because this is not acceptable and we can't go on like this.
Yeah, 100%.
So fun conversation, Drew. I mean, it's a pleasure to at least talk to you, share some thoughts, get this out. I hope things change. I really hope at least with this new leadership, maybe we can start the healing process or at least start going to couples therapy. I don't know, something along those ways. But yeah, it's a pleasure. And like always, you guys can find us here on Twitch, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, YouTube, Podbean, whatever else. Take care. Let us know what we can do. And we have our 2021 predictions still coming up later this week. We
Yes.
just had to push that off.
Yes. Strangely, this was not in that prediction. Shocker.
No, no,
All right,
no.
well,
All right.
take care, folks. Even you, DFKGF, I do appreciate you commenting, man. We welcome disagreement, but I am gonna argue with you if you come at me. Thank you all for watching. We do stream. Usually it's on Tuesdays around 5, so that's kind of where I'm doing, and we kind of did this one impromptu because of how crazy yesterday was. But again, yeah, follow us on YouTube, Podbean, Twitch, the whole works, and thank you guys for watching.